Hi, this is Gloria Lara, Executive Director of the Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance, otherwise known as LEDA. And thank you so much for joining us today on this live stream. First of all, I need to acknowledge the sacrifices and the honor that our veterans have brought upon themselves and what they've done for our nation. This is Veterans Day, and we need to remember why they've sacrificed. So honor your veterans and thank them. So today I'm very pleased to be able to have as our guest Joané Booth. Joané, I'm bringing her on. Joané is a partnerships manager with an organization called the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. They are a nonpartisan organization, and she assists with building strong and authentic intentional relationships with diverse communities across the state of Michigan. But before she joined the Michigan LCV team, she lived in Minnesota, and she's had, I think, a really interesting career path. She worked as a diversity and inclusion outreach director for U.S. Senator Tina Smith. And before that, she worked as a senior policy advisor to former Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton. So, Joané, thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to join you and kind of talk about what took place last week and, different things that I've done in the past as well.
Great. And we'll talk a little bit more about what took place last week, because Joané has a very interesting observations and had a very interesting experience last week with our elections. So Joané, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and especially how you came from Minnesota to Michigan? People might be wondering that.
Yeah, so I kind of got my start in politics in general back in 2013 when a state senator was looking to diversify the staff at the state house and the state senate, because when I was there, I was the only Black woman of color on staff out of the state house and the state senate, which is made up of hundreds of members. And out of all of their staff, I was the only Black woman. And so he was very adamant that he needed to find someone that could come in and bring a different perspective. So he took a chance on me, hiring me without any background, really made sure to invest in me and invest in my next steps and thinking through what opportunities could come my way and how to make sure I'm prepared for those. And from that job, then Governor Dayton's staff actually reached out to me after about 3 years with Senator Champion, and then asked if I'd be interested in being a policy advisor to the governor on criminal justice, public safety, what else? Human rights. And so it was a really fun portfolio for me and a natural transition. So I did that for about 3 years, worked for Governor Dayton. And then in between that and after that, I've worked on U.S. Senate campaigns for Senator Tina Smith. And then also I worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign as her political director in Minnesota. And then after I worked for the Smith campaign and helped get her elected, then I became her diversity inclusion outreach director. And so a lot of my focus was on just building relationships with communities of color and helping bridge that gap. Because what I noticed is that at the federal level, most folks don't really have a connection. They don't really understand or see themselves in that work. And so figuring out how can we make sure they know about grant opportunities and different policies taking place. And then as I was doing that job, right as I kind of started getting going, my husband, who was my fiance at the time, got a promotion at work, which moved us to Michigan. And so I had to leave that job. And about a year ago, my husband and I moved here, and we currently live in Canton, Michigan. And so I got here and I had no clue what I was going to do for work. And I just kind of started putting out feelers. And luckily, Bentley Johnson from the Michigan League of Conservation Voters was so gracious enough to, talk with me and just explain some roles they had open. And one of those was a partnerships manager. And I was like, oh, this is about, building relationships. I don't have any background in environmental work, but I think I can get there. And, they took a chance again on me by hiring me. And so I've been there for, it'll be a year in January. So yeah, a really, really fun path to getting me here. And, you just never know where you'll end up. But I'm just so blessed that I've got to meet some great people and do a lot of incredible work as well. Oh, I think you're muted, Gloria.
Yeah, I do that all the time. So happens. It even happens in the national news. So,
Right.
when people see people doing that, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm not the only one.
Yep, we
So
all do it.
we all do that. So that, I mean, that's a really great and interesting path. So before we dive deeper into some of your more recent experiences, can you tell us a little bit more about your work with the Michigan League of Conservation Voters? And if you can start by giving an overview what the MLCV does and the importance to the state of Michigan, I think that would really help a lot.
Yeah. So Michigan League of Conservation Voters is a nonprofit that is focused on, the main goals are protecting the environment, preserving land, air, and water. But my favorite thing about Michigan LCV is that the breadth of work that we do. So we really expand across a variety of different lanes, and it's really powerful. And I think this past election really showed our reach and our width to do so much work. And so, for example, this past year, we expanded to doing civic engagement work. So Claire Allenson and Olivia Bradley from our team have led an amazing team that helped recruit poll workers, that helped simply turn out the vote, that helped get folks registered, all in the C3 space with our education fund of just making sure folks turned out and did whatever they could to contribute to our democracy. So that was an incredible program. We also have a government affairs team that is ran by Nick Acapenti and Joe Fedewa and Hallie, and those folks are really great at tracking things that happen at the legislature and staying on top of different things that may come about, whether they're good or bad, but making sure that we're always in the game and always at the table for those conversations, protecting Michiganders' water, land, and air. And then we also have a team of political and outreach ran by Londell Thomas and Bob Allison, who also oversees a lot more. But they help really, they're our boots on the ground, right? So they're out talking to folks about the importance of clean water and breathing in clean, healthy air, right? And just making sure everyone is aware of how they can plug in, because we do know based on polling that water is a number one issue for Michiganders. So we're making sure we're out talking to folks and like showing them, hey, you can come talk to us if you'd like to figure out how to plug in, if you'd like to figure out how to hold elected officials accountable, work with us. And so that's our P&O team. And then we have an incredible communications team ran by Nick Dodge. And so that team is, in charge of making sure we're getting the message out there as far as we can and getting the word out, doing different things to engage folks in many creative ways, especially during this COVID era with Zoom and things like that. And then finally, we have our partnerships team, which is our development team, which is ran by Lauren Malice. And so that's the team I'm on. And so I like to use the comparison that we're kind of like the scouts for Michigan LCV. So what we do is we go out and find opportunities to bring folks into the fold and to partner with them. So even if you're working on education, we figure out, okay, well, how can we talk about clean water in your children's schools, because it all ties together? Or with health, how can we talk about making sure, a community that has high asthma rates is talking about the air in their community? So we get out there and we figure out ways to bring folks in and work together on a variety of issues. And so we're ran by the amazing and incredible Lisa Wozniak, who I think has done an incredible job leading the ship. And so we do a lot of different things. And I think that's what makes our organization so, incredible and powerful when it comes to things like elections.
And you are a nonpartisan group, is that correct?
Yes, we are nonpartisan. So, we have, worked with or endorsed Republicans in the past and Democrats. It just, as long as you are with us on our issues, we're willing to work with you.
Great. Yeah, and I don't know if people have been aware of it, but that's, LCV really does a lot of work in holding, like you said, holding our elected officials accountable, regardless of what side of the aisle they're from, regardless whether they're local, regional, or national. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Keeping our eye on the ball, just keeping everybody safe, healthy, and keeping our planet green.
Exactly. So you most recently were a nonpartisan poll challenger for the 2020 U.S. presidential election. This is just like last week.
Yes.
Serving at the TCF Convention Center in Detroit. For old timers like me, that's the old Cobo Center. Can you please share with us what your role was?
Yes. So my role was a nonpartisan challenger. So challengers in general, their role is to essentially kind of observe, and if need be, if they see something that they don't believe is correct, to challenge that as poll workers are counting ballots. So for example, if you see someone doing a process that you think may be incorrect or may be biased towards one party or the other, then it's your role to step in as a challenger and follow the necessary processes laid out. And so when you have challengers, there's different types. So there's challengers for parties. So you have Democratic or Republican challengers, and then you have nonpartisan challengers, which was like myself. So it's meant to make sure that there's accurate representation from all sides, so that you can't say, oh, it's just Democrats at the table, oh, it's just Republicans at the table. Like, the goal is to get a very mixed bag of folks so that it's a fair process and everybody gets to see the same thing, at the same time. Oh, you're muted.
So there's always challengers roles in every election. Is that correct? So it's not just unique to this presidential election.
Yeah, it's part of the process to have folks that can oversee the process, the counting and things, and just make sure, as our democracy is fair and very accessible as well, I'd say, because this was my first time doing it, and I thought it was pretty clear, and the instructions were clear as well.
So are you speaking of instructions? So did you attend some type of training beforehand, or how does that work? Can you take us through the process? Because people are wondering what's behind that. How do you get to be a challenger, and what do you need to do as you do that?
Yes. So I actually got pulled in from Claire Allison, again, from Michigan LCV's Education Fund. That's how we were working. And she, essentially said, they need more nonpartisan challengers down at TCF. Are you interested? And I was like, definitely, let's see whatever I can do to just make sure all votes are counted and everyone has access. And so when we got there about 6 a.m. in the morning, we did a very quick training with the folks that were kind of running everything, of just what to expect, what to watch for, the rules, what you can do, what you can't do. And then also we got credentials so that as we walked around the room, folks knew that we were allowed to be there. And so from then on, then you're kind of assigned like a zone. So I think each group does it differently, but how we did it was folks were assigned kind of zones to try to make sure all bases were covered. And you literally just kind of walk back and forth, and you just watch for anything that may be incorrect, or, if you see another group challenging, maybe you step in, especially as a nonpartisan, to be that third voice and just observe. And so you can document what you see as well.
So were there equal numbers of Democratic challengers, Republican challengers, and nonpartisan challengers?
Yes. So, I did not sit and count everyone's, but I would say there was not a point in the day where I was like, oh, there's more Democrats, or there's more Republicans, or there's more nonpartisan. Like, it was a pretty consistent, group of challengers from each party throughout the day.
Okay, so and this
numbers increased to where, for example, I think I was told, but I did not see it myself, but like that, I think some GOP challengers may have been brought in a larger group, and then you saw Democrats coming. So it was pretty consistent throughout the day from what I observed.
Okay, and when you said you got there at 6 a.m., that was 6 a.m. on election day itself?
That was actually the day after.
The day after.
Wednesday, which kind of got more of the coverage, which as they were counting and really digging into those mail-in ballots.
Right. Yeah. Oh, in fact, yeah, that was just a week ago. So that's just
a week ago.
Pretty fresh in everyone's mind. So how long were you there?
So I got there around 6 a.m. and I believe I left around 8 p.m.
Okay.
So a while.
Oh, a while. And then did you come back the next day while they were still while they were finishing up the counting?
So I did not come back on Thursday. It was my understanding that they wrapped up part of the process around like midnight. So by the time I had left, they were getting close. I think they were getting through the military ballot. So they didn't have much left to do. And so by the next day, there wasn't a need for challengers as far as I knew. So I didn't have to go back in.
Well, that's pretty amazing, because lots of times in previous elections, the counts in Detroit take a little bit longer. And so this was quite well organized the way they did it this time.
Yes. I mean, as I said, I've never been a part of something like that. And from the time I walked in, I was simply impressed by the organization, by Daniel Baxter, who really kind of oversaw everything. And he just kind of, I mean, the way he guided that amount of people through that, you know, what could have been a very stressful process, I thought was incredible. He would get on the mic and just remind folks, you know, the rules, or remind his team like, hey, we're just going to keep doing our work. Everyone stay calm. And so it was just a really, really well ran process. And the poll workers, I mean, even through all the little things that were done to try to distract them, just remained above the fray and focused and kept counting, kept doing their job. It was amazing to watch.
About how many tables or poll workers were there? I mean, because I would see it on the news, and it's like, wow, there's a ton of people there, but about, I mean,
what? Right.
Yes.
Yes. So I believe there was about 100, I can't remember if it's 134 or 164, but there's over 100 tables. And then at each table, there's about 8 people. So imagine that. And so those are all the tables you saw and folks sitting down. And then the challengers were usually the ones up and walking around. And the poll workers were wearing either like a white top and black pants or all black. So you could, for the most part, kind of distinguish them. But there were quite a few people.
Okay. So did you ever have an opportunity or did you ever need to challenge a vote? And if so, can you sort of talk through what might be the reasons why a count could be challenged?
Yes. So I did not have to challenge any votes. I saw a few that attempted to challenge, but once they continued the process, realized they did not have grounds for an actual challenge. But typically, like some of the things that you could challenge, for example, is during the military ballot process, there was a process, and this is also why you may have heard a lot of coverage around that specifically, is because when you're in the military in Michigan, you email your ballot in. And so what happens is once they get that copy, they then have to take that email version and actually fill in an actual ballot. And so you have challengers that, like, of course, now that's the process where folks say, oh, well, you could change. And that did not happen. But those are the sorts of processes. Like if you saw someone maybe accidentally fill that in. Again, I did not witness that. That did not happen. But that would be grounds for challenging. But that was not what you were seeing was challenged. Instead, you saw people challenging, you know, random things, like just minute everyday processes that these people follow every election, you know, because it's kind of like you have this group of outsiders who has no clue how things run. And then they get in the room and they question every single movement. Right. And so you saw a lot of that, but I didn't really see too many valid challenges. Or if like a address or something didn't add up, you could challenge maybe to see and make sure that gets corrected. But I myself did not have to challenge anything.
Yeah, because
doing their job.
So I accidentally spoiled, because I voted absentee. I accidentally spoiled my ballot when I was getting ready to put it in the secrecy envelope. I noticed like a mark on the back side, I think on the non-partisan side, and looked like, oops, I think I got some makeup on there. Yeah. So I actually took it back to my township office and they gave me a new ballot and put that one with the spoiled ballots, because I wanted to be absolutely certain that there would be no issues with my ballot. I mean, so are those the types of things that the poll workers actually look for, things like that? Do they have to determine, oh, that's just a lipstick smudge or something like that on the ballot?
No, I did not witness really anything like that. I think if anything, folks, what I did see is like if poll workers ever did have a question like that, there was a supervisor around at all times so that they could have another person kind of, you know, the good thing about it is I think there wasn't room left for like interpretation or guessing what you think should happen. Mm-hmm. There was always someone around that could say, oh, that's just makeup. Like, you don't need to worry about that, right? So you didn't have a poll worker just guessing like, oh, well, I'm going to assume, you know, everybody follow the processes. So I didn't witness anything like that personally, but I did witness over and over. If at any time a poll worker had a question about something, they had little red flags they could wave and say, hey, what is this thing on this ballot? What should I do with it? And then someone would come over and give them clarity on how to handle it.
Great. So there was a lot of discussion and news coverage about what was going on at the TCF Center in Detroit. So you've taken us through what the process is And it's a similar process that happens every election with the same types of instructions, I'm assuming, and, just to try and keep a very deliberate, calm pace, focusing just on the ballots. So that would be like the normal. So what did you observe that was out of what I would say the normal?
I would say one of the biggest things that I observed that I just thought was unfortunate was folks chanting inside the room. So I know that when everything was taking place and when you were hearing coverage that there was talks about folks chanting either directly outside the room or actually outside of the building, but there were also people chanting directly inside the room saying stop the vote. And obviously that is breaking the rules. Like any form of intimidation or causing issues is breaking the rules. So that was, completely out of line. I saw some challengers, and I will be honest, there was a particular party that was much more, I'd say, problematic than others. And that was the Republican Party, which was, they were also doing things like asking poll workers who were sitting at the table counting ballots, what's your name? Where do you live? Why are you supposed to be there? Because they were misunderstanding the rules about how many Republicans and Democrats and nonpartisan folks you can have at the table. And so then they started actually talking to poll workers, which you shouldn't do. I routinely witnessed folks breaking the rules by stepping within the allotted 6 feet next to poll workers. So when you first get in and you get, they sign you up on the book to say you're in there, the security at the table tells you must stay 6 feet away from the table. The only exception is when you're stepping to lean in and observe just to get clarity on something, but then you need to step back. And so there was at one point where for about an hour, I had to just stand and watch one particular challenger because she continuously stood and hovered over these people that are trying to do their job. And, her mask wasn't always up. So not only are you just trying to be distracting, you're also putting folks' health at risk. And so, I had to do a lot of that. Again, I saw some folks get escorted out by the police because they weren't properly wearing their mask, or they were doing things like starting chants or intimidating folks or taking pictures and video, which was also not allowed because you're in a room with highly secure information. And imagine if you were a voter and someone got a picture of your ballot or your information, and now that's on the news. There was just a lot of rule breaking and what I'd say intimidation tactics. Luckily, they didn't work because that group of poll workers was so incredibly strong. I mean, they just kept doing their work regardless of the distractions. And, it was just really unfortunate. These folks were doing their job. They were following all the protocols, but there was a certain group there that was there to cause dissension and chaos. And it was very apparent by anybody that was in the room.
All right, well, that's, unfortunate, but I'm assuming that the rules were made very clear to them at the beginning. They could do that. Question that I have, so they were not allowed to bring in or use their phones for recording or taking photos or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on election day, there was what's called I believe a sequestration period, which is a challenge to say, but that was on election day to where you couldn't have phones, you had to stay in the room for a certain amount of time. But then on the second day, the day that I was there, you could have your phone in there, but you could not be on your phone, recording a poll worker or taking pictures of a poll worker or anything like that, because again, these folks are it's like having medical records, right? You don't want anyone in a room with your medical records and a phone. So you were not supposed to have your phone out to be recording or taking pictures of anything.
And Joané, that's actually an excellent remedy because you wouldn't want anyone to be fooling around your medical records or having access to them or looking at them.
Yeah.
Unless they were authorized people to do that. So, so what are the consequences for those who were chanting inside the room, trying to intimidate? They were just escorted out and that was it?
Yeah. So I know officers did a great job of trying to find, the folks that were causing problems. I think folks in the room did a great job as well of trying to call attention to any of those sorts of issues. So yeah, there were a few times where folks were escorted out, and I think there's some pictures of some folks being escorted out. One guy actually had to get hemmed up, if you will, because he was like, I guess just maybe wouldn't originally follow the directions of the officers. And so it was helpful to have them. And they also helped kind of provide a sense of calm after there was beating on the window from outside of the room, because that was also kind of a tense moment where, you know, you have these folks trying to do their job and there's folks trying to beat down the glass. You know, so then that's when officers stepped out and that's when they put up the paper. But I've heard misinformation that the paper was put up to keep people out, but really it was because folks outside the room had cameras and phones again, and they were recording inside the room, which again, you cannot do. So
okay, so it was to keep them from recording inside the room.
Because pretty much that whole like wall where you enter the room was glass and like windows. And so they did leave like one open for the door you come up, but they kind of covered them some so that, you couldn't just have your camera up recording every single movement in the room.
Okay, great. It's, you know, because there was a lot of coverage for just a minute on the news about what was going on. They were just showing the people banging on the windows. And, you know, I want people to have an understanding of really, you know, your observation is that it was really a very calm environment and people were just focusing on doing their job.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because as I said, it was almost like two different experiences, right? Like there was one group there that was there to make it tense, chaotic, and do whatever they could to slow down the process and or stop the process in a lot of issues. But then there was the other group, which is the poll workers and most other challengers that were there to just make sure Michiganders, Detroiters' votes were counted and responsibly, which they were, and just make sure everything ran smoothly. And so for those folks that were just doing their job, you know, they just kept doing it. But then if you step back and you kind of look at folks beating on the window, you're like, where am I? You know, so it was kind of like being in a different world where you're like, at, you know, again, at one table, you have these folks like focusing, getting things done. And then the next you have folks like beating on the window and chanting. And you're just like, what's going on here? So, yeah, I'd say the poll workers remained calm. You know, they communicated different challenges when they needed to and did a great job.
So there is a question I have that probably a lot of other people have as well. When you say counting the votes, are they actually manually tabulating the votes, or are they actually getting the ballots ready to go through the machine?
Yes. So when I should clarify that. So when the folks that were at the table, that's what they were doing, was opening the ballots, kind of organizing them separate, make sure they, you know, got their barcode and all of those different things, and preparing them to then go to the next step, which I believe was putting them in the machine. And then there were people that could watch that process as well, right? So yeah, the folks sitting at the tables in those kind of square configurations, those folks were kind of taking the ballots out, organizing them, getting the whole book, which was actually done on the computer, getting that ready, getting information in there.
So, and then they match the signatures. So what you're saying is if you're a voter in Michigan, your signature is there electronically to show, so that when they look at the signature on the ballot envelope, it matches a signature that's online.
So it wasn't, I don't believe they were looking at the electronic for the signature. The signature was more of like looking at whatever process they have, but the book was more so where you could see the person's name, their address.
Okay.
That was kind of like, they have, I guess what's called like a poll book that is typically a physical written book, but now it's I don't want to say it's online, but you can put everything into a computer. And my understanding is that part of the reason why that was done is that they set up these screens too, so that you didn't have to be within the 6 feet looking at someone on a laptop. You could now see everything they were doing on the computer. So you could see that person's barcode. You could see if things matched up that way too. Okay,
great. Yeah, because that's, you know, regardless of what was going on, I think to a lot of people, well, I mark my ballot and I drop it in the ballot box or I send it in, and what happens after that? Yeah. That's a mystery. How does it get counted? So I think one of the outcomes from this election is having people very focused on the process after you cast your ballot.
Yes.
And understanding what that is.
Yes. I'll be honest, prior to this experience, I was one of those, like, I voted, counted, we're good, you know, but I think you're right. So many people now are actually understanding what it takes. And I thought that was kind of the audacity too in the room of like, here's a process that has been happening for years that you've never paid attention to. And now all of a sudden, because certain things are said, you just assume malintent, you know, and just that these folks aren't doing right. And you don't really understand the basic process to know what you're challenging, you know, to know what isn't right. You're just saying, nope, that doesn't look right. You held that ballot too long, or, you know, so it's just, it was really interesting too to watch folks that, like, as you said, never cared about this process now pretend as if they knew exactly what needed to happen in that room.
Right. So all these were the ballots, the absentee ballots, the ballots that were brought in manually to to the drop boxes and the mailed in ballots, because the ballot that you actually cast at your polling center, if you vote, you remember that you actually put it in that secrecy envelope and then you feed it into the machine yourself.
Yeah, that's funny because in our neighborhood, there's like, you know, little Facebook groups or whatever. And I swear, like the day after election day, there was multiple people like, well, how do I know that my ballot was counted when I voted in person? So it's just interesting to see, like, now everyone is very focused on making sure their ballot is counted. And it's like, they are getting counted, you know? So folks were commenting that exact point of, if you saw it on the machine, your ballot was counted, you know, like, let's have faith in our democracy, faith that folks are doing the right thing, because that is what is happening.
Great. So, are there any thoughts that you'd like to share with us? Any additional thoughts after having had that experience of being a poll watcher, challenger?
Yeah, I'd just say that it really, you know, I've had people reach out and say, you know, oh, are you okay? Like, that must have been horrible. And like, for me, it was actually really inspiring, because to sit and watch, you know, I'm going to, you know, now introduce race into this conversation as well, to sit and watch a room full of predominantly Black people make sure that their votes and their neighbors' votes are counted, and accurately making sure that they do it with the most precision and thought and integrity, was powerful. But then it was also really powerful to watch them navigate this space where people around you who were predominantly white are challenging you, are trying to intimidate you, are used to getting their way. They're used to just saying, you know, something is right, even though it's not, and getting away with it. And it was very powerful to see in that room those folks continue to stay above the fray, to continue to do their job. It was powerful to watch supervisors really advocate for their workers and, you know, ask folks to step back. And so for me, it was just like, wow, I need to be doing more around elections. I, you know, next time need to be counting votes in my community and making sure that, you know, I'm doing my job, because, you know, I don't know if I was in that situation that I would have the same patience that those people did. I mean, if I could figure out a way to get everyone across the country to celebrate these people, I would, because just the work that they did and how they were able to finish it is incredible. And I'm still blown away. Like, when I talk about it, I get chills, because that's how moving it was to just watch them, you know, continue to work as folks are beating on the glass and trying to scare them, because you really didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know if that window was going to come down. You know, you did not know. And then I'll also say, you know, there are a few interactions where, you know, I watched the same challengers, who some of them were white women, and created this tense environment, then get scared and say, oh, and ask the cop, oh, can I leave now? Is it okay for me to leave? You know, after, it's like, you created this environment. It would be totally safe had you not engaged and supported this, you know, kind of tense environment. And so it's also interesting to watch the same people that contributed to it now want to run from it. But then, you know, the next day you hear, oh, well, it was disruptive and it was dangerous. It was not dangerous. And it was not the poll workers acting in that manner, because they acted. I mean, everyone should be commending them for the work they did. So I was just so moved. I hope everyone that watches this is also moved. I hope everyone that watches this will want to become a poll worker now, and also will, you know, give a round of applause for those folks that, you know, may have taken a few days to count them, but they did it, and they did it in some of the worst circumstances.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really powerful. And that's, you know, like you said, we don't think about it after we cast our vote. What happens? How do those numbers translate to what's up there on the screen, you know, when you start watching the news? And, you know, everyone that was involved in that, whether you're here in Detroit or, you know, across the country or in the states that are still counting, is to be commended, because this is, you know, I consider it a badge of honor
Yeah.
to be able to keep our democracy going, where every vote counts.
Yeah.
And every vote is counted.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. I mean, for people, because I remember people used to say years ago, oh, why should I vote? My vote doesn't count. We're starting to see that it really does. It really does make a difference. And democracy can be messy.
Yeah. It's not perfect, but it's good. We've got a good handle on it. And I made that point as well, that I agree with you completely, that this also showed the importance, this whole process nationally showed the importance of every vote. I mean, look at Georgia. You see the president-elect was winning by just a few thousand votes. And it's just like, to know that that's your neighborhood. You know, had your neighborhood not voted, it could be the difference in who is or isn't president. And so I try to look for the silver lining in all of this. And I hope that it's that more people, especially people of color, turn out to be poll workers and make sure that their communities are represented. I hope that it means that folks will also understand the power of their vote, because it is real. Like, you know, this election was just crazy. And it's because, you know, everybody turned out and voted for what they believed in.
Right. And that's, you know, regardless of your political persuasion, your party, your beliefs, you're knowing that your vote matters and your vote counts. And this is your opportunity as a citizen to make your voice heard. I mean, that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
So I have a question. How often do the vote tallies get submitted to the media? You know, do you know anything about the process of taking the actual vote tallies from where they were being counted upstream to the media? Or that's another guest I'm going to have to try and find to get there.
Yeah, that would be another guest of someone that is way smarter than me. But I will say, I believe that for sure, like, that has to go through the Secretary of State's office.
Right.
So they actually have to like release those numbers. So as far as I know, it was nobody like in the room giving counts to the media directly. There's another step in there somewhere. But what that looks like, I do not know.
And you're right. I believe it is the Secretary of State's office, because if I want the results for some of the elections that are not national elections, I'm always going on the Secretary of State's site and clicking refresh to see if my friend. Yeah.
All right. 10 more votes. All right. 10 more votes. You know, just keep it.
Exactly. Right. So, oh, wow. I mean, and I know you'll remember this experience the rest of your life, because it's so important and fascinating, critical. And thank you so much for being a part of it, because it's, you know, it's people like you that help make this whole process work, you know. So
it was awesome.
So a slight change on topic, because we're almost done, but there's a couple of more questions I wanted to ask you. What advice would you give to a young person of color who's interested in serving in government, especially when a lot of the government still doesn't look like them?
Yeah. So for me, I might have mentioned, but when I first got started, I did not even know the difference between federal, local government. Like, I knew nothing. And so I made sure to be transparent about that when I walked in. And it was interesting that folks are actually willing to help learn. So I think being transparent and asking questions to actually learn, stepping back before you just interject, like listening and understanding the environment you're in, especially when you're the only person of color, that was really helpful for me, because I could step back and say, all right, I understand all the players at the table. Now this is how I want to navigate these different spaces without showing my hand, if you will, too early. And so that's really important. I also think seeking out internships to see if you are interested. So I know traditionally a lot of folks do usually get into politics through internships, but usually not as many folks of color are part of those internships. I know, for example, in Minnesota, there's a whole program called Pathways that does that and focuses on getting people of color into internships so that they can eventually become staff or electeds or whatever. So looking out for those sorts of opportunities, volunteering on campaigns, that's always a really cool way to get to know candidates or electeds and get to see, you know, how things work. And like really just being open to any opportunity. You know, almost every job that I've had, at some point I said I would never do that. So when I worked in politics, I said I would never do that. I'm not interested in politics, don't care. And now you can't get me to stop talking about it. When I became a policy advisor for Governor Dayton, I said, I never want to do policy. I don't care. Like, it's not my thing. I'm not good at it. And then I ended up being a senior policy advisor. So just really keeping your options open and understanding that even if you don't know it in that moment, there's an opportunity for you to learn and grow and humble yourself. You know, really just, again, be transparent. Don't walk into the room as if you know it all. Like, be open to learning and working with folks. Now, you know, there are some times where you do need to walk into the room and command it, especially as a person of color, but understanding when there's a moment to do that and when there's a moment to step back and learn and understand the environment you're in.
Great. I mean, those are really, really great thoughts, particularly for someone who wondered, gee, this is something I might want to do. Mm-hmm. So as we end, are there any parting thoughts that you would like to share with us?
No, just, you know, continue to check out Michigan League of Conservation Voters, and we would love to have you in the work that we do to, continue to fight for clean water, land, and air. So check us out. And then also, support poll workers. So if you know someone that did it, thank them, buy them lunch, just really thank these folks, and then sign up for the next election, because they really were the heroes of this election, and I'd say the heroes of our democracy. So be sure that you're at that table the next time too.
Great. So thank you, Joané. Okay, if you can hang out for just a couple of minutes, and we'll talk a little bit after. So thank you so much for being our guest and for informing us about something that we've wondered about and really didn't come clear until just recently. So yeah. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
And thank you. So right now we are busily recalibrating our schedule, and I hope to have another speaker next week. And then we'll be taking a little break for the Thanksgiving holidays. So thank you again. Remember, LEDA, Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance, what we do is we help build bridges between different groups of people. I'm really excited because we just had our Calling All Colors main session for this year with our students in high schools and middle schools. We did that virtually instead of in person, and it seemed to go pretty good. But what we do is we have people starting at a young age, middle school and high school, starting to talk with each other to help build those bridges, to help understand each other. And as you can see from Joané's experience, it's really important that we're able to have civil conversations with all sorts of people. So thank you again so much. Take care.